So today, we already talked about the resume basics. I talked about the things that are important to consider when you're starting to write your resume for the first time. I just wanted to run through really quick do's and don'ts, things that are absolutely going to be great for you and things that are absolutely going to kill your resume before it even goes to the employer's hands. So first, do. Absolutely make sure that you revise your resume for each potential employer. This is absolutely important because every employer's ad is going to be different. They're going to be highlighting different skills and experiences that they find relevant to their position, right? So depending on their needs, the skills that they need to talk about or the skills that you need to talk about are going to change. So make sure that you are revising your resume very slightly for each job so that way you can make sure that you're emphasizing the skills that are talked about in the advertisement, okay? So again, go to the advertisement, pull it out, and you're gonna see a list of requirements and a list of preferred qualifications. Make sure that you have as many of the things that they talk about on the preferred qualifications list mentioned in your resume as possible. If they do not mention it in this preferred qualifications, does not necessarily mean that they won't find it desirable, but it does mean that it might not pass that preliminary screening if you don't have enough of the preferred qualifications that they are seeking. Next, make sure that you use action verbs that relay specific skills. This is extremely important as well. A lot of times people will use just fluffy, empty worded statements that say, I was responsible for this and that. And when you just use empty words like, I was responsible for, that can be somewhat problematic because it doesn't really communicate anything to the reader, right? If I say, I'm responsible, does that mean that I was a leadership there? Was that a leadership responsibility? Was that something I was tasked with? I'm not really sure what to make of something that says I'm responsible for something. So avoid these empty words and use action verbs that relate to specific skills. Be sure that you use bullets in your resume. That's very important. Long, wordy paragraphs or big blocks of text can be very problematic for an employer. They need to scan this document, right? So if your resume doesn't catch somebody's attention within 10 to 15 seconds, that resume is going either to the bottom of the pile or going into the recycle bin. So make sure that bullets are used because that's going to be one of the most effective ways of summarizing information so that your employer can skim through it and get what they need. Avoid numeric dates because they are very ambiguous, right? They could mean a couple different things. When you get into a professional field that requires a lot of documentation, you're going to realize that the way that we abbreviate numbers, 2/4/2018, could mean a couple of different things. If I said 2/4/2018 and I'm doing a technical documentation of some kind, what I'm actually saying is April 2nd, 2018, the second day of the fourth month, 2018. However, our shorthand in the private sector usually will go February 4th, 2018. But because the fields are so different, because there is some ambiguity there, you don't want to leave that as an option, right? So avoid numeric dates whenever possible. Instead, you're going to want to list your formatted dates as month, year to month, year. So if I was going to cite this thing here, I would say February 2018 to May 2018, something like that. Make sure that you're writing out the months in their entirety and make sure you're formatting all those dates consistently because that's going to be really important to avoid any ambiguity that an employer might face. The organization of headings should always occur most relevant or most important to the least relevant or least important. That's because the stuff that falls off at the bottom will always be the least important thing that employer needs to know, okay? So you're going to begin, most of you are going to begin when you're listing your headings. Education is going to be right up there. It's either going to go objective education or it's going to go objective summary of qualifications education, right? For most of you, that education experience is going to go towards the top. So make sure that that is happening here when you're organizing your headings. Next, proofread. Make sure that you proofread your document so that there are no typographical or grammatical issues that will, seal your fate, so to speak. It's really important to make sure that you proofread everything. So those are the do's. To finish up the don'ts, you're going to make sure you don't forward this generic resume to everybody. Make sure you avoid empty words like responsible for. Instead, start with those action verbs. Avoid big wordy blocks of text. Avoid numeric dates because they're ambiguous. Never list high school information. It's really important to understand your high school stuff was great to help you get into college. But now it's time to move beyond that, okay? You can't rely on things that you did 4 years ago when you were at home with things that you did now as a college student and as an adult. So make sure that you never list your high school information. Don't go that far back in time. And also avoid any political or religious content. For some positions, there's obviously going to be some some exceptions to this deal. There are certain organizations, like maybe if you wanted to apply to be a youth minister, or if you wanted to apply to be, I don't know, some kind of a office worker for some sort of a religious or political affiliate. If you wanted to work for, I don't know, say Capitol Hill, you wanted to be a page with a congressman, you can do that. And in those cases, the political details might not matter so much. But in the private sector, politics and religion can be very toxic, right? These are very divisive issues, and there's a lot of prejudice, whether people acknowledge prejudice or not. If you self-identify as like an atheist or as a religious minority like a Buddhist, or even if you're a Christian, certain Christian sects are predominant in different sections of the country, right? I was raised Catholic way back in the day. And I met some friends in school who, when they found out I was Catholic, said that that's not Christian. And we had an interesting debate about that at the time. But yeah, so there are those things that come into play, that even if you think that your religion is pretty, mainstream, there are still people that could have some sort of a prejudice against you, and so you want to avoid those prejudices whenever possible. So by putting religious and political details on there, it can kind of be toxic for your career. So I would say, I'm not necessarily saying you have to hide your identity, I'm just saying that it doesn't need to live on your resume. And when you get hired, you can be whoever you want to be, and that's your prerogative. But you don't want to give anybody an excuse to discriminate against you. This also goes to parents. When my wife had kids, she became very involved in some parenting groups, and she started doing some outreach and community outreach and stuff like that. But she was also a young woman, and there was a time when she was a young woman with young kids, and she's applying for a job, and some employers had some legitimate questions. Ooh, how committed is this mother going to be to her job now, right? So the same thing goes for family information, family details. You don't need to give that information out. Make sure that you don't give any protected information out prematurely, because people will use that to discriminate against you, whether they say they will or not, right? It's a lot of it's subliminal. So make sure you avoid that sensitive content. So instead of just religious and political details, let's just say avoid sensitive content. Got it? The last thing I'm going to say in the don't that I did not put, but I think it's important to emphasize: templates. Do not use templates. This is because templates are very difficult sometimes to format the way that you want to format them. A lot of times when you're using a template, it's going to list the headings in a certain order, and that's the order it's going to go in. So that's why a lot of times in the template you're going to see employment history coming way up at the top, and education stuff is way down at the bottom, because that template is intended for somebody who has extensive work history. Sometimes you're going to run into situations where I'll have somebody hand in a template resume, and it's really easy to tell because they did not click and type in any content in one of the little areas. So in one of the text boxes it reads type info here or something like that. Just because they didn't click on that, or they didn't notice that, and so you'll have sometimes empty fields that just say add info, or type content here, and that just looks bad. Another thing with templates is a lot of times the templates all look the same. So if you use the same template as a handful of other people, your resumes all look the same. They're going to either go to the bottom of the pile or they're going to go in the recycle bin. That's just the nature of templates. So generally speaking, never use a template. That is just all around a bad idea. Plus, if you're using a template and you're saying, I have computer skills, right? I know how to use Microsoft Word. I know how to use Publisher. I know how to use all these other technologies. Great, you know how to use them. Why don't you, right? So if you're saying, I have these technical skills, I have these word processing skills, I have fluency with Microsoft products, Microsoft Word, I'm a good writer. If you say all of those things and then you use a template resume, it pretty much says, I do not believe in my skills and I'm lying. Okay, so avoid templates whenever possible. Start from scratch. You have complete control over the formatting of the document. You have complete control over the content that you include in that document, the formatting of the dates and everything. So make sure that you use a blank document. Do not use a template. So I guess that's pretty much the do's and don'ts, things that you need to keep in mind when you're going forward. If you have any other questions, please let me know. Otherwise, happy writing and good luck.